All right, our study for this session is Abraham. And so what we're going to do is just go over the exegesis of, and that is the then and there. What was Abraham going through? Where did this story come from? And so we're just going to run down the questions that we'll ask every week in every session about doing proper exegesis. How do we get back there into the then and there time? So we start out with who wrote these accounts of Abraham. So it was Moses that in the first 5 books, Moses wrote the first 5 books. Now he had 40 years to think through all this stuff and get revelation from God, and I don't know how exactly, it doesn't say exactly how Moses got all these accounts. And in this society, it's primarily through oral. There wasn't really anything written down per se. There might have been some things, but primarily it goes through the oral skills. And as a matter of fact, I have a friend that runs a organization right now that's what they're all about. They are training their leaders to be orally proficient to spread the gospel to these communities or backwoods, deep, dark jungles through oral skills, because there's just no way to go in there and quickly translate. You know, Wycliffe has done a great job, but again, even when they go in there, it might be 5-10 years before they get a translation and understand the language. So the oral stories had to be passed down. So it's probably the main way that Moses got a lot of these accounts. And there may have been something written down, but we don't know that. So what is the subject in an event? What's the big picture of Abraham? Why is this story in the Bible? Well, it's God's calling and God making a covenant with Abraham. So if we look at the Jews and say, well, they're a separate race, they're separate, but we got to remember Abraham was from what you would look at an area right now it would be Iran. Okay, so he's originally from there, and the Iranians consider themselves different. If you're not aware of that, like, you don't say an Iraqi is an Iranian. They're all kind of the same type of people. They consider themselves Persians. All right? And they consider themselves different than just being Middle Eastern. All right? They're in the Middle East, but Persians are different, at least in their eyes. But Abraham comes from that area, and he goes to the Promised Land. When did this happen? So if you kind of look at the generations in the Bible, about 10 generations after the flood is when Abraham occurs. Now some will say, well, you can't take the generations literally in the Bible. So if you were to go in the Bible and you started mapping out the years and the people that were there, one valid way of interpreting that is to say, I'm just taking the Bible for what it's worth, and if these are the accounts that this said, Abraham is only 10 generations removed from the flood. All right? But some would go in and say, well, generations, they were just sort of generic terms. There might have been a bunch in between there. So this could have been thousands of years instead of, in this instance, I don't know, it might have been 8,000 or something like that. All right? So does that make a difference? Maybe, maybe not. But the general story of Abraham does not change. All right? Whether it's thousands of years removed or just 1,000 or hundreds of years removed. So where did this happen? So we talked about that. So Abraham, we often hear about the accounts of Abraham, but it seems like him and his father moved from Ur, which was down near the Persian Gulf, and if you notice any of the routes to travel, the shortest route, by way of the crow flying from Ur to the Promised Land, is like straight across the Sinai Peninsula. But there's one little issue there. There's no water. So you get out in the middle of that desert and you die. So you can't go that way. So it's about an 800-mile journey going from Ur all the way to the Promised Land, because you're going to go north along the rivers up there and whatever route there was. And then for some reason, it does not say exactly why, but in the town of Haran, which is north, they stayed there for a few years. So whether Abraham's father said, I don't want to go any further, I'm hanging here, they were up there for a little while, and then Abraham did get the call of God, and God said, you need to go to a strange land that I will show you. So that's when he travels south. But you need to be thinking, you're taking flocks and herds, and you're trying to travel, and so a 20-mile day would be a super day. That would be a great day. But if you're taking herds and kids and flocks and things like that, a 10-mile day might be more realistic. All right? And so, let me see, 800 miles, 10 miles a day, that's like 80 days. And that's not counting any rests in between. That's a long trip. That's almost 3 months that you're taking to do this journey. Now, how many of us, I know when I go backpacking, I'm thinking through everything of what I need, what are my food supplies, how do I do this, and it's a major production for me to go out in the woods for a week. I can't imagine I'm going to take a 3-month journey, and now along the way there obviously are places where you replenish and you resupply, but you just got to wrap our brain around that and say, how the heck this is just a major undertaking. When God says, pick up all your family and go to this strange land. Because you don't even know what is in this strange land. It's not like I can go on the internet and plug in and say, what's it like there in Canaan? What's the weather? Let me check about the people there. What kind of restaurants are there? I don't know anything about this land of Canaan. I got some word of mouth. There might have been some tradesmen that went over there and embellished some stories. If they were like me, who knows what account they would have gotten on there. So in any event, that's what we got to be thinking about that. Now, why is something being said or mentioned? Why this person? So Abram, his original name means exalted father. So Abram was an exalted father, but his wife was barren. All right, so he did not have any children. So we're getting with this name, and we get down the line here, and God eventually renames him and calls him Abraham, which is father of many. Father of many, for a guy that does not have a wife that can bear children, is kind of maybe a slap in the face when Abraham's going, what's going on here? And he leaves. Now, another thing about him leaving this land, this town of Ur, he's 75 years old. All right? So there's a whole nother factor there. It's one thing to leave when we're young and we're jumping around. Now, Abraham was obviously a hardy guy, but on the other hand, leaving at those ages is a tough thing. So how's this going to happen? So we got a whole list of things here of God speaking to Abraham. So he tells him, leave Haran, go to a land I will show you. And he appears to him. To your descendants I will give this land. So you'll notice as we go down these list of things, God is constantly telling Abraham, to your descendants,